In the Adventurer Guild, an adventurer named Act is being expelled by the guild master Iranx. Iranx tells him in a firm voice that he is nothing but a useless person and that the guild no longer needs someone like him. Act feels shocked and confused when he hears those words. He tries to explain that he has worked for the guild for many years and has taken part in several dangerous missions. He says that he has always given his best for the team and cannot believe that he is being treated like this after everything he has done. Iranx, however, does not seem moved by his words. He slowly stands up from his seat and looks down at Act with a cold expression. He says that the guild is facing difficult times and he cannot afford to keep people who no longer bring any benefit. He adds that effort alone is not enough and that results are what truly matter. Then, with a strict tone, he tells Act to pack up his belongings and get out of the guild at once. Two people from behind arrive and grab Act by his arms, dragging him out of Iranx's cabin while he struggles to keep his balance. Act looks back at Iranx with disbelief and asks him what he should do from now on. Iranx replies in an arrogant and cold tone that he can do whatever he wants, saying that it is no longer his concern since Act is no more a part of the guild. His words echo through the hall, leaving Act with a deep sense of helplessness and anger. The doors of the guild close behind him as he steps out into the empty street, carrying nothing but the pain of being rejected by the place he once called home. Years pass, and in a mid-sized city of the Geit's kingdom, a blacksmith named Cage enters the guild master's cabin of the local adventurers guild. But this time, the guild master sitting in that chair is none other than Act himself. Even after all these years, he still remembers the moment when Iranx banished him. That painful day changed his life forever, and from that moment on, he made a firm resolution deep within his heart that he would never become such a cruel and heartless person like Iranx. Act looks at Cage with a serious expression and tells him that he is a useless person whom the guild does not need anymore. He says that there is no reason for Cage to come to the guild again, and that he should stop wasting everyone's time. His words sound cold and emotionless, completely opposite of the resolution he once made years ago to never become like Iranx. Cage stands in shock for a moment, unable to believe what he just heard. Then, after taking a deep breath, he quietly repeats the same words that Act once said to Iranx when he was being expelled, his voice trembling with pain. Act does not respond with sympathy. He simply tells Cage that he will not say it twice and that he should leave quickly. He says in a low voice that he does not know what he is supposed to do after this because he has no family or friends to rely on. He adds that if he is thrown out as an adventurer, he will have nowhere to go and will end up living on the streets. For a moment, the room falls silent as his words hang in the air. Then Act finally speaks again, telling Cage that he has been promoted to vice director of the blacksmith guild called Hammer of the War God at the capital headquarters. Cage stands there with wide eyes, unable to believe what he just heard. He hesitates for a moment and then asks Act to say it again, thinking that he might have misunderstood. Before Act can respond, his maid Frederica steps forward and explains calmly that what Act is trying to say is that he has found a better job for Cage. Cage looks at both of them in confusion as Frederica continues to explain that one of Act's close friends has been looking for a capable and skilled person to work with him. Act nods and tells Cage that since he has trained his blacksmithing skills for so long and has reached a certain level of mastery, it would be better for him to use those abilities in a new and more rewarding environment. He says that he wants Cage to show off his talent in a place where it will truly be appreciated. After saying that, Act turns to Frederica and tells her to hand over all the documents related to the new job and the work arrangements to Cage. Frederica opens a small folder and carefully passes the papers to him. Act then adds in a calm voice that he himself is getting married soon and believes that it will be good for Cage to have a stable source of income before starting this new chapter of his life. He assures Cage that he does not need to worry about money, as he will personally take care of all the moving costs, travel expenses, and anything else needed for his transfer. Tears slowly roll down Cage's eyes as he realizes the truth behind Act's words. His voice trembles as he thanks Act for all the trouble he went through because of him. He says that he never expected such kindness and that he will never forget this favor. Act looks at him calmly and tells him that what he did was not for his sake, as the Adventurer Guild does not really need blacksmiths. He explains that his decision was simply because Cage is a truly talented person, and letting such skill go to waste would be a great loss for society. Hearing those words, Cage lowers his head and says that he has never been able to repay Act for anything. He recalls how Act hired him when his previous guild expelled him and how Act was the one who discovered his talent for blacksmithing, a talent that even Cage himself had not realized. He says that without Act's help, he would have never known what he was capable of. Act listens quietly and then replies that Cage should stop worrying about those who are left behind and instead focus on getting used to the new environment as soon as possible. His tone is firm but filled with care. After a short pause, Act tells him that since everything is settled, he should leave the guild now, as he is no longer a part of it. Cage wipes his tears and smiles brightly, saying that he will never forget what Act has done for him. He promises that he will work extremely hard, become a great person, and someday repay this debt with his own hands. Act nods with a faint smile and wishes him to do his best. Cage bows deeply, his heart full of gratitude, and then leaves the cabin. As soon as Cage leaves the room, Frederica turns to Act and asks him if it was really a wise decision to let Cage go, since he was such a useful and dependable asset to the guild. Act looks at her with a calm expression and replies that Cage will definitely succeed because his eyes can already see that future. He says that Cage is going to become the best in his new organization, and that is why he thought it would be more beneficial to use his talent in that place rather than keeping him here. Frederica listens carefully and nods, saying that she understands his point. She compares his action to feeding a goat with proper nutrition so that it can later grow strong and provide healthy meat, meaning that his decision will bring greater results in the long run. She also adds that Cage was truly grateful for everything, even though he was being expelled. Act lets out a small sigh and says with a faint smile that no one will ever complain about getting expelled if he continues to handle things in this way. Frederica giggles softly and says that she is really impressed by his cleverness and the way he turns every situation to his advantage. Act then leans back slightly and wonders out loud why Cage thanked him even though he was expelled by him and now even feels a debt that he must repay. Frederica smiles and says that Act is truly a wonderful villain and a remarkable guildmaster who knows how to achieve his goals without showing cruelty. Act chuckles and agrees with her words. Then he asks Frederica if he has to attend any outside meeting next. She looks at her notes and replies that there is a dinner appointment scheduled for 5 p.m. Act nods quietly and stands up from his chair. As he walks toward the gate, the words of his former boss Iranks still linger in his mind, echoing like a distant memory. He recalls that painful day when he was unjustly expelled from his own guild, and how he made a firm resolve at that moment never to become someone like Iranks. He also swore that he would not allow another person like Iranks to exist again. Since then, he has decided to gather those who have been cast out by the world as useless, polish their hidden potential, and release them back into society. To him, it feels like collecting dull pieces of coal and turning them into bright and shining diamonds that would one day illuminate the world. On the western continent of the world, humans and many different demi-human races live peacefully within their respective nations. In the human nation known as the Geitz Kingdom, a grand national conference is currently being held inside the royal castle. The atmosphere in the large hall is tense, as the main topic of discussion is the growing threat of the Demon King and his army. King Joseph Gada sits on the royal throne, surrounded by his ministers and high-ranking officials, all wearing anxious expressions. The king speaks in a firm tone and says that there seems to be no objection among the ministers regarding the hero who has been chosen to defeat the Demon King. He declares that the one entrusted with this important mission is none other than Lawrence, the hero of their kingdom. The ministers murmur among themselves for a moment before one of them raises his hand and stands up with a serious look on his face. He respectfully objects to the king's statement and says that while it is true that Lawrence is the hero fated to defeat the Demon King and that they all believe he will live up to their expectations, there still remains one important problem. The ministers continues with a serious expression that the hero is just so much strong. The king asks him what he means and what is the problem in that. The minister continues his explanation with a serious tone and tells the king that Lawrence possesses extraordinary strength that goes far beyond the limits of ordinary humans. He says that the hero's power is so overwhelming that there are no comrades in the entire kingdom who can keep up with him in battle. The king listens carefully, nodding in agreement, and says that such power is indeed essential when facing the Demon King, as only a person of unmatched strength could hope to stand against that terrifying enemy. However, he also admits that the situation becomes complicated if the hero has no one who can fight beside him. The king then asks his ministers to explain just how strong Lawrence really is. The minister bows slightly and replies with respect that the hero is capable of defeating a dragon completely on his own without any assistance. A quiet murmur spreads among the officials in the hall, as many of them find the statement difficult to believe. Sitting beside the king, Princess Alice listens to the discussion in silence. She thinks to herself that even a high-rank adventurer, who is already considered among the best, would struggle to defeat a dragon even with a full party of skilled companions. The thought of a single person managing such a feat on his own feels unreal to her. As she glances at her father, she wonders quietly how they could ever hope to find suitable companions for someone who stands so far above everyone else in strength. The ministers continue to discuss the growing threat of the Demon King and the strength of Lawrence, while the king listens carefully, weighing every word. They all acknowledge that the reason humanity has not yet been annihilated by the Demon King is because of the sacred barrier left behind by the ancient heroes, a powerful protection that has kept the world safe for many generations. However, as time passes, even this sacred barrier is weakening, and its power alone may not be enough to stop the Demon King if he attacks in full force. The tension in the hall grows as everyone considers the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, Prince Edward, who is sitting quietly on the other side of the king, speaks up unexpectedly. The king, noticing his son's intent to speak, gives him permission to continue, nodding for him to share his thoughts. Prince Edward clears his throat and recommends to the entire conference that they can rely on ACT. His words catch everyone by surprise, and a ripple of astonishment spreads through the room as the ministers exchange glances, unsure of how this suggestion fits into the current discussion. Prince Edward continues, explaining that ACT is the person who originally recognized Lawrence's extraordinary talent and nurtured it carefully, guiding him to reach the level of strength he now possesses. Because of ACT's skill in understanding and developing exceptional talent, Prince Edward insists that he is the right person to find companions who are capable of keeping up with Lawrence and assisting him in the mission to defeat the Demon King. Princess Alice listens carefully to the discussion and then asks the ministers to tell her more about ACT, curious about the person Prince Edward had recommended. One of the ministers, speaking cautiously, tells her that ACT is widely considered the most hated and corrupted guildmaster in recent times. Alice looks puzzled and asks him what he means by that, wanting to understand the full story. The minister continues, explaining that ACT established his own adventurers guild when he was very young, and that he has been responsible for growing it rapidly. He says that under ACT's leadership, the Adventurers Guild has risen to become a second S-ranked guild, a remarkable achievement in such a short period of time. Alice listens and then asks innocently what is wrong with elevating a guild to the top rank in just a few years, thinking that this is a sign of talent and determination rather than corruption. The minister hesitates for a moment and then elaborates further, saying that although ACT's achievements are impressive, there are many dark rumors surrounding him. He says that people have heard that ACT has a habit of throwing out anyone he considers unnecessary from his guild, and that he has strong influences not only among the nobles of the kingdom, but also in other countries. He adds that there are even more frightening stories, including one in which another guild supposedly offended ACT and was mysteriously wiped out overnight. Princess Alice wonders if such a person really exists. The minister listens to Prince Edward's recommendation about negotiating with ACT, but does not quite agree with the idea, feeling uneasy about trusting someone with such a dark reputation. He starts to voice his concerns, but the king immediately gives him a sharp, piercing look, a death stare that silences him instantly. The king tells Edward firmly that he is leaving the matter entirely in his hands, and that he trusts Edward to handle the negotiations as he sees fit. Edward bows slightly and replies that he will soon take the necessary steps to negotiate with ACT and ensure that everything is done properly. Princess Alice, sitting beside her brother, speaks up and asks the king if she can also accompany Edward during this important mission. The king looks at her curiously and asks why she wants to go along. She answers confidently that she does not want to remain idle during such crucial times and, as the princess, she also wants to take part in important decisions that will shape the future of their citizens. The king considers her words for a moment and then grants her permission, acknowledging her dedication and sense of responsibility. Edward looks at Alice with slight surprise and admiration, telling her that she is truly serious about her intentions. Alice smiles and says that while she trusts him completely to handle the negotiations, she also wants to be directly involved in the process. Edward nods in agreement and asks her if they shall go together. She looks at Edward with a bright smile and happily replies with a firm yes, showing her excitement to join him. With that, the meeting in the royal conference hall is concluded, and everyone begins to leave, still discussing the weight of the decisions made and the plan to rely on Act for finding companions for Lawrence. On the other hand, far away in Act's home, the morning is calm and quiet. Frederica quietly enters Act's room, greeting him cheerfully with a soft "good morning," and tells him that breakfast is ready on the table. Act thanks her politely and walks toward the breakfast table, noticing the small pastry placed neatly on his plate. Curious, he asks Frederica about it, and she explains that it is a gift from the head chef's child, Lily, who had made it with care just for him. Frederica then apologizes, saying that the pastry is made of sugar and other unnecessary ingredients, which are not good for his health. Act smiles gently and tells her that he will eat it anyway, because it was made by Lily and he does not want to ignore her efforts. Frederica looks at him in slight surprise and asks if he really wants to eat it despite what she just said. Act reassures her, saying that all her effort and Lily's thoughtfulness would go to complete waste if he does not eat it. Frederica smiles warmly at Act and tells him that he has a gentle heart that never avoids or ignores the feelings of others. Noticing how he values the effort and care people put into small things, Act looks at her calmly and replies that he is not really the gentle type, which makes her smile even more and leaves her quietly impressed by his humility and honesty. He notices the way she is smiling and says that she should smile like that in public too, because it makes her look very beautiful and could even help in negotiations or important meetings. Frederica shakes her head slightly and replies that she wants to keep that kind of smile only for her master, showing her loyalty and the special bond she shares with him. Act nods and tells her that she can do as she wishes, and he does not want to force her to change. After they finish their breakfast, they both leave the house and head toward the Adventurers Guild, walking together through the quiet morning streets. On the way, Act asks Frederica about their agenda for the following day, curious to know what awaits him. She explains that after the usual morning paperwork check at the guild, he has an important meeting scheduled with the mayor of the city. Then, pausing for a moment, she asks him if she should postpone some of his other tasks to make time for the mayor's meeting. Act replies calmly that it is fine as it is, adding that he does not understand the meaning of postponing work that is already in front of him. Act enters the Adventurers Guild, and immediately all the guild members rise to their feet as a sign of respect. They greet him in unison, saying, "Good morning, sir," their voices carrying both reverence and familiarity. Frederica steps forward and addresses the members, reminding them politely that Act has a very tight schedule for the day, and that if they do not have any urgent matters, they should step back and allow him to continue with his work. As the members begin to settle, a young girl suddenly comes running from the crowd, her steps quick and eager. She reaches Act, her voice stuttering slightly as she tells him how glad she is that she could see him again. Act looks at her calmly, addressing her by name as Yoko, and asks gently what is wrong with her, noticing her anxious expression. Meanwhile, the other guild members whisper quietly among themselves, commenting that she has now become a court magician and has left their guild long ago, expressing their surprise at seeing her back. Frederica glances at Act and reminds him that they do not have much time before the scheduled meeting. Act listens to the situation carefully and then tells Frederica to cancel the meeting for now, saying that he will personally go later to apologize for anything that needs attention. He then turns his focus back to Yoko and tells her that they can talk more comfortably in his room, away from the crowd of guild members. Once they are inside, he offers her a cup of tea and asks gently if she is feeling all right now, noticing that she seems flustered from earlier. Yoko takes the tea and agrees, apologizing softly for her earlier behavior and for disturbing the schedule. Frederica, standing nearby, explains to Act that Yoko was expelled from the royal court last month but was quickly offered a position as a court magician because she showed extremely high potential in magic. Curiously, Act asks Yoko if the new job did not suit her, expecting that she might have faced difficulties adjusting. Yoko shakes her head firmly and smiles, saying that it was actually her dream job and that she has no complaints about it at all, adding that she is grateful for the opportunity. Yoko takes a deep breath and begins to explain the situation to Act more clearly. She tells him that after being assigned to the Magic Research Division, she faced repeated harassment from Chief Hagen, who used his position to touch her in inappropriate places. She explains that Hagen has been using his noble status to threaten her with suspension or other punishments if she did not comply with his improper demands, leaving her with no way to defend herself. Yoko continues, her voice shaking slightly as she recounts the events, saying that he touched her in many places that were completely wrong, making her feel unsafe and powerless in her workplace. When she tried to speak to her colleagues about it, They told her that resisting him was useless and that it would not make any difference, leaving her feeling even more trapped. She adds that she held back for a long time because it was the job that ACT had personally introduced her to, and she did not want to disappoint him or waste the opportunity he had given her. Her hands tremble as she admits that she can no longer endure the situation and, with a voice breaking slightly, she tells ACT that she has decided to quit her position as a court magician. ACT recalls clearly that Yoko once submitted her work even when she was feeling very unwell, showing the depth of her dedication and her strong sense of responsibility. He knows that she is the kind of person who would never abandon her duties unless faced with a situation that is truly serious. He remembers how happy she had been when he gave her the opportunity to take on her dream job as a court magician, and he feels the weight of responsibility for what has happened to her. ACT gently asks her to lift her head, and when she does, she sees that he is bowing deeply before her, showing his sincere apology and respect. ACT apologizes, telling her that it was his mistake to introduce her to such a place without thoroughly investigating the environment and the people she would be working with. Yoko shakes her head slightly and tells him not to blame himself, insisting that all of it is the fault of Chief Hagen and no one else. ACT listens carefully, but then he says firmly that he cannot allow her to join the guild again, concerned for her safety and well-being. Yoko's voice trembles as she pleads with him, saying that she has nowhere else to go and that she feels lost without a place to belong. ACT looks at her and reminds her that it was always her dream to become a court magician, a goal she had cherished since she was a child. Yoko feels shocked at his words and asks him in disbelief if he still remembers everything about her. ACT nods calmly and tells her that he does indeed remember everything about his subordinate. ACT slams his hand firmly on the table, his voice sharp and resolute, telling Yoko that being a court magician has always been her dream and that he will do everything he can so she does not have to give up on it. He promises her that he will make sure Chief Hagen understands the consequences of touching someone as precious and talented as her, someone whom ACT has carefully polished like a rough diamond with his dirty and corrupt hands. Without hesitation, ACT takes out a magic communication device and contacts Hagen directly. When Hagen answers, he asks ACT coldly if anything is wrong, his tone filled with arrogance. ACT responds calmly, asking Hagen if he has some spare time for a meeting the next day. The following day, ACT meets with Hagen in person. He begins politely, first apologizing for taking Hagen's time, but Hagen replies in a dismissive and arrogant tone, saying that ACT is wasting his precious time. ACT does not waste a moment and comes straight to the point, telling Hagen that he has heard about his inappropriate actions toward his former subordinate, Yoko. Hagen smirks and replies that he does not recall doing anything of the sort. He asks ACT if he has any proof to support such claims, and adds that if ACT cannot provide any material evidence, he could easily be making up a story to ruin his reputation. Then, with a cruel smile, Hagen orders ACT and Frederica to leave the room, saying that he has some personal matters to discuss with Yoko. Yoko feels extremely uncomfortable and nervous at his words. Frederica leans slightly toward Yoko and whispers softly, telling her not to worry about anything and to leave everything in ACT's hands, reassuring her that he will handle the situation. Yoko takes a shaky breath, trying to calm herself as she nods silently. ACT turns back to Hagen and speaks in a firm and calm voice, telling him that he does indeed have evidence of Hagen's inappropriate action. Without hesitation, he activates his right eye, revealing a visual from a few days earlier. The image clearly shows Hagen alone in a room with Yoko, speaking to her about a delayed assignment. During that private conversation, Hagen took advantage of the situation to touch Yoko inappropriately. Hagen's face immediately turns red with anger and disbelief, and he erupts furiously, demanding to know if ACT possesses the so-called cursed eye. ACT calmly confirms, telling him that his right eye has the ability to read hidden events from the past, and what Hagen just saw is undeniable proof of his misconduct. Hagen's expression changes from anger to panic as he realizes the severity of the situation. He says sharply that if this evidence were to be revealed, his position would definitely be destroyed, and he will never allow anything like that to happen under any circumstances. ACT calmly asks Frederica to hand him a knife, his expression composed despite the tension in the room. Suddenly, Hagen launches a violent attack at ACT, using powerful wind magic, the air swirling sharply toward him. Without hesitation, ACT swiftly swings the knife he borrowed from Frederica and effortlessly cuts through the wind, slicing it apart as if it were nothing. Hagen stares in shock and disbelief, unable to comprehend that his wind magic, which he considered lethal, was neutralized by a single knife. In the very next moment, Frederica leaps above Hagen with precision and force, slamming his head onto the table. Her voice turns cold and sharp as she asks him if she should tear him apart for daring to try and harm her master. Act raises a hand calmly, telling Frederica not to waste her time or magic on someone like him, showing his control over the situation. Hagen glares at Act, still incredulous, and says that it is impossible for someone like him to predict the movement of his wind blade. Act meets his gaze steadily and tells him that he can see everything with his eyes. He explains that his right eye has the power to read hidden events from the past, while his left eye can see through the future. Hagen freezes in disbelief, his voice trembling as he asks if Act truly has the eyes of Chrono, the legendary king of time, who possessed magical eyes that could perceive both past and future. He wonders aloud how a commoner could possibly possess such rare and powerful eyes. Act steps forward toward Hagen and speaks firmly yet calmly, telling him that he is not a demon and that he will let this matter slide if Hagen sincerely apologizes to Yoko and promises never to commit such an act again toward anyone. Hagen hesitates for only a moment before he immediately bows and apologizes deeply to Yoko, asking her to forgive him. Yoko, still cautious, asks him if he truly admits his guilt. Hagen nods solemnly and confirms that he does admit his guilt, promising that he will never, under any circumstances, behave in such a manner ever again in his entire life. Act turns to Yoko and asks her gently if she feels satisfied now with how the situation has been handled. Yoko nods and agrees quietly, though a hint of relief still lingers on her face. Act tells her firmly that this is not the end and that Hagen will face the full consequences of his actions. Just as the tension in the room begins to settle slightly, Prince Edward suddenly enters, his presence commanding and unexpected. Everyone in the room, except for Act, is astonished by the prince's sudden arrival. Hagen stares at him in disbelief, wondering aloud what the prince himself is doing there, clearly unprepared for such an intervention. Prince Edward bows respectfully to Act and speaks politely, saying that it has been a while since they last met, showing both his recognition of Act's authority and his own humility. Hagen cannot believe his eyes, shocked that the prince of the kingdom would bow to a commoner in this manner. Act, maintaining his composed demeanor, asks Edward if he heard what Hagen had said a few minutes earlier regarding his misconduct. Edward nods in agreement, showing that he is fully aware of the situation. He then looks Hagen directly in the eyes, his gaze firm and filled with authority, and tells him that he feels deeply ashamed to call someone like Hagen a noble, expressing his disappointment and moral judgment. Hagen, panicked and desperate, begins to beg Edward, insisting that everything is a misunderstanding and trying to escape responsibility. Prince Edward, unwavering, tells him calmly but sternly that they have undeniable evidence of his wrongdoing and, more importantly, that he has just confessed his guilt, which means he will undoubtedly face severe punishment for his actions. Hagen, still desperate and trying to defend himself, tells Prince Edward that it is really unfair for him, arguing that he only touched a commoner and that it should not carry such severe consequences. Edward looks at him sternly and replies firmly that in their nation, all people, whether commoners or nobles, are equal. And if Hagen cannot understand something as simple and basic as that, then his noble status is completely meaningless and cannot protect him from the consequences of his actions. Edward's words leave Hagen speechless, realizing that his arrogance and sense of entitlement have brought him to ruin. A few days later, Yoko comes to see Act, to make a report about her current situation. She tells him with a bright and relieved expression that Hagen has been fired from both his position and his noble status, and that the new manager who has taken over is very kind and supportive. She adds that she is now able to enjoy her work without fear and is learning a lot under a safe and respectful environment. Act listens to her carefully and smiles gently, telling her that he is very glad to hear this. Yoko thanks Act sincerely for all the help he has given her, expressing her deep gratitude for his support and guidance during the difficult situation with Hagen. She then smiles and tells him that she has always thought of him as an amazing person, but she had no idea that he could fight so skillfully and with such precision. She mentions the legendary eyes of Chrono and says that she would really like to investigate something like that someday, her curiosity and excitement showing clearly on her face. Noticing the serious and watchful expression on Frederica's face, she quickly adds that she was just joking and did not mean to make things tense. Act listens carefully and tells her that his eyes are not meant for everything, explaining that the future seen through them can become less clear for events that are far ahead, and that using them consumes a very large amount of magical power. so he cannot rely on them recklessly. Frederica quietly adds that Act truly possesses foresight and intelligence far beyond a normal person, but she reminds Yoko that he is not a god and has his limits. Yoko nods happily and assures Act that if he is ever in trouble, she will definitely come to his aid, promising her loyalty and support. Frederica thanks Yoko for her concern and words of kindness. After that, Yoko politely bids her farewell to both Act and Frederica and leaves the office. Frederica looks at him and tells him that he is really an awesome guildmaster, as he not only solved the problem, but also established strong ties to the next court magician. Act tells her that he only did what was natural, and he does not understand how he is being so much thanked. Frederica smiles and tells him that he is really an amazing guildmaster. A while after Yoko's situation was fully resolved and she had settled into her work comfortably, Act meets with Prince Edward for a scheduled discussion. Act begins politely, apologizing for any trouble or inconvenience he may have caused during recent events, expressing his sincere regret. Edward listens calmly and responds that it is not Act who should feel responsible, but rather it is their fault for failing to address the internal corruption that allowed such incidents to occur in the first place. After a pause, Edward leans forward slightly and tells Act that he has a favor to ask, his tone serious yet trusting. He explains that he wants to leave the selection of the next hero party entirely in Act's hands, showing his full confidence in Act's judgment and expertise. Act looks at him carefully and asks if this favor is about finding suitable companions for Lawrence, wanting to confirm the details before proceeding. Edward's eyes widen slightly, astonished by Act's quick insight, and he admits with a small laugh that there is no point in hiding anything from Act. Act responds to Edward in a calm and measured tone, telling him that he did not see the future or anything of that sort to figure out the situation. He explains that he limits the use of his eyes in daily life because many fools try to take advantage of their power, and so he chooses carefully when to use them, relying on them only when absolutely necessary. Act then comments that it must be a significant challenge for them to find companions who are truly worthy of Lawrence, someone so strong and capable. Edward nods in agreement, admitting that he had been hoping to borrow Act's connection, knowledge, and insights to make the selection process easier and more reliable. Act listens thoughtfully and then warns him that the higher-ups of the boards will not remain silent under any circumstances, implying that any misstep or misuse of authority would be noticed and acted upon. Edward adds that the ministers only understand him and his decisions on a surface level. Act reflects quietly and tells Edward that he knows the ministers will never trust anyone who is not under their influence, and since he does not belong to any of them, they will not allow him to take part in such matters. He explains that the ministers are primarily motivated by their own interests and would never permit a young commoner like him to take credit for an important task, as it would not benefit their own positions or fill their pockets. Considering this, Act politely declines Edward's request, telling him that he has his own ambitions and goals to pursue, and therefore does not have the time or inclination to involve himself in the selection of companions for the hero party. Edward listens carefully and responds that he fully understands Act's reason, but he emphasizes that Act is the only person capable of completing this mission successfully, precisely because he is independent and not under the control of any minister or political influence. Edward bows respectfully before Act, requesting him to lend his strength and expertise for the sake of the future of the country, showing both humility and urgency in his plea. Act, however, remains firm in his decision and refuses once again, telling Edward clearly and without hesitation that he is not interested in the future of the country. Princess Alice suddenly barges into the room, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief, and asks Act sharply why he is refusing the king's direct orders, clearly frustrated by his defiance. Act looks at her calmly and responds that the fate of the world is none of his concern, explaining that it is Lawrence who will ultimately save it, and therefore it should be Lawrence's responsibility to gather the heroes he needs. He questions them pointedly, asking if they are truly so weak that they must rely on an unrelated civilian to carry out such an important task, implying that their own abilities and authority should be sufficient. Alice's anger flares at his words, and she grabs her brother Edward's hand firmly, insisting that they should leave immediately and head home, unable to tolerate his insolence. Just as they turn to go, Act calls out to them, telling them that it is too late to leave today and that they should return home the following day instead. Alice's face hardens as she replies sharply that she did not expect him to show any consideration at all, and that she has no desire to listen to any advice he offers, making her frustration and disappointment clear. Act nods slightly, accepting her words, and tells her calmly that she can act as she wishes and make her own decisions. Edward, still maintaining his composure despite the tension, apologizes to Act for the disruption and assures him that he will return again soon. Frederica steps forward and tells Act that Princess Alice is being very rude, adding in a low, fearsome voice that she even felt a momentary urge to beat Alice to death because of how openly she spoke. But Act calmly tells her that such thoughts are a waste of time and will solve nothing. After a pause, Act's eyes give him a sudden vision, and he quietly tells Frederica that he wants her to do something for him, which makes her lean closer and ask if he has just seen something with his eyes. As she notices the change in his face, he explains that his eyes sometimes show him pieces of the future without his choice, and that these visions come more clearly in critical moments, so he cannot always control when they appear, and Frederica listens with steady attention before agreeing that she will do whatever he asks. She then asks why he is bothering to help the prince and princess, and he answers that he is doing this work not only for their sake but also to further his own plans and ambitions. Prince Edward and Princess Alice are traveling in their chariot toward the royal castle, the wheels clattering softly against the cobblestone road as the scenery passes by. Alice speaks first, her voice tinged with frustration and disbelief, telling Edward that she never expected Act to be such a terrible person and that she cannot understand why he behaves the way he does. Edward listens calmly and then replies that Act was actually right in his action, explaining that it is the duty of the royal family to face the demon lord and protect the country, and that relying on someone like Act to handle certain matters is reasonable. Alice turns to him angrily and demands why he seems to be siding with Act, her eyes flashing with irritation and confusion. Edward answers gently, trying to explain his perspective, that Act is not a bad person at all, and that in fact he is probably the kindest person in the entire country, someone who acts according to his own principles and values rather than for recognition or praise. Alice looks away, her expression a mixture of disagreement and reluctance, clearly struggling to accept her brother's viewpoint. Edward thinks quietly to himself that it could become a serious problem if Act and Alice continue to misunderstand each other, because both of them are incredibly important for the future of the country. Edward explains to Alice patiently that being good to others and being kind are two very different things, and that even though Act helps people, there is a real probability that he could face harassment or obstacles from the ministers if he involves himself directly in matters concerning the royal family or the country. Alice listens with a frown and tells him that she is unsure whether prioritizing one's own future over the future of the country is the right choice, clearly wrestling with the moral dilemma. Edward nods in agreement that her concern is understandable, but he then adds that the royal family and the nation are also supposed to provide compensation for any losses or risks that Act might face while helping them, and that he has a duty to protect his subordinates and his guild as well. He continues, explaining that Act has the ability to safeguard both his organization and the country simultaneously, but if he fails in any part of his responsibility, the consequences could be disastrous for everyone, and that is why he has the right to decline their offer despite the importance of the task. Edward also emphasizes that Act is an extraordinary person, someone with intelligence, foresight, and courage beyond the ordinary, and that his decisions are guided by careful calculation rather than selfishness. Alice looks away and replies sharply that she can only see Act as a corrupt guildmaster and nothing more, showing that she still cannot understand his true character or intentions. Edward sighs quietly to himself, thinking that eventually she will come to see Act's greatness. Suddenly, something strikes the chariot violently, causing both Edward and Alice to lose their balance and fall from their seats onto the floor of the vehicle. Edward quickly tries to push himself up, scanning their surroundings for any immediate threat. At that moment, a man steps into the chariot holding a knife in his hand, his movements deliberate and threatening. Edward reacts instantly, grabbing the man's wrist to stop the attack and shouts to Alice to run away, urging her to get to safety as quickly as possible. The stranger struggles violently against Edward's grip, pushing him backward and stepping forcefully on his palm to break free. He warns Edward in a harsh, determined tone that he will not allow them to escape under any circumstances. Edward demands to know who is behind the attack, his voice firm despite the pain, trying to understand the reason for the assault. The stranger replies coldly that it is someone who finds them bothersome, giving no further explanation. Edward wonders silently if this could be connected to the selection of the hero party, suspecting a deeper political motive. He quickly tells the man that Alice has nothing to do with their business and should not be harmed, but the stranger responds arrogantly that he does not care who is involved as long as he is getting paid for the task. Then, without warning, he grabs the princess's hand and looks directly at her face, his tone dropping to a creepy and menacing whisper as he says that he intends to have a lot of fun with her before he kills her. Edward clenches his teeth tightly and, using all his strength, pushes the stranger out of the chariot, finally freeing himself from the immediate threat. He immediately grabs Alice's hand, urging her to run with him as fast as possible, hoping to escape the danger that surrounds them. However, as soon as they step out of the chariot, they are confronted by 7 men standing in a line before them, blocking any path forward. The men look at Edward and Alice with cold, calculating eyes and tell them in unison that they have finally come, their voices full of menace and anticipation. Edward reacts quickly, trying to draw his sword to defend them both. But before he can fully act, an arrow suddenly flies past and grazes his cheek, leaving a sharp cut that stings painfully. He staggers backward and collapses onto the ground, weakened and in pain. Alice rushes to his side, trying desperately to help him up, but Edward is too weak to stand, and her attempts are in vain. One of the men steps closer and, with a cruel tone, tells Edward that the wound is poisoned with a fast-acting toxin and that soon his brother will die if nothing is done. Another man addresses Alice directly, explaining that they had planned to attack them the other day but decided to wait until they returned late in the night to catch them off guard. Hearing this, Alice instantly feels a surge of regret and guilt for not following Ack's advice earlier. Alice begins apologizing to her brother repeatedly, her voice trembling with fear and guilt as she tries to express her regret for not listening to Ack's advice. Suddenly, another man steps forward from behind and leans toward her, suggesting in a cruel tone that they should leave Edward to die and focus on having some fun with her instead. Alice shouts sharply, warning him not to touch her, and struggles violently to resist his grip, trying desperately to protect herself. The man sneers and tells her coldly that no one will come to help her at this hour, emphasizing their isolation and the danger she faces. Just then, a strong voice calls out from behind, telling all of them to give up and run away while they still can. Everyone immediately turns to see who is speaking and is shocked to find Act standing there, calm but commanding. He repeats firmly that it is not too late for them to escape safely if they act quickly. The stranger, glaring at Act, responds arrogantly that he has saved them a lot of time and effort simply by coming alone, implying that he still considers himself in control of the situation. Act looks at Alice and tells her sternly that they ended up in such a dangerous situation precisely because she ignored his advice, making it clear that her own choices contributed to the crisis. The stranger's anger flares at Act's words, and he draws his knife, charging aggressively toward him. Act moves with remarkable speed and precision, dodging each attack effortlessly, and the stranger cannot believe his eyes, unable to comprehend how Act can evade his strikes even in the darkness. In the next instant, the bandits see Act standing calmly beside Edward, his presence commanding and unshaken despite the chaos around them. He takes off his coat and gently offers it to the princess, asking her to wear it for warmth and comfort. Then he assures her that he has stopped the poison, which makes Alice's eyes widen in shock and relief. She asks him quickly how he was able to do that, and Act explains that he possesses a rare ability called time manipulation, which allows him to control the flow of time within a living body. Using this power, he was able to slow down and stop the progression of the poison inside Edward's body, preventing it from causing further harm. Tears roll down Alice's face as she feels an immense wave of relief, finally able to breathe easier knowing her brother is safe. Act turns his cold, calculating gaze toward the bandits and tells them firmly that they are already checkmated, and it would be far wiser for them to surrender immediately rather than continue their foolish attack. One of the bandits, trying to mask his fear, replies arrogantly that Act might be strong, but they have allies hiding nearby who will come to their aid. Act calmly raises his right eye and shows them a visual of many men being eaten alive by a huge wolt, asking the bandits if those are the allies they were counting on. The sight terrifies all of them, and they begin to falter under the weight of his power. Act comments coldly that they fell into his trap perfectly and that thanks to their actions, he has already eliminated one of the trash groups that was disturbing the capital. Enraged, the bandits charge at him with full force, determined to kill him, but Act moves faster than they can comprehend. In a blur of motion, he knocks down 2 of them in an instant, his ability of time manipulation allowing him to move with speed and precision beyond human limits. One by one, he incapacitates each bandit, leaving them all unconscious on the ground, and the princess stands frozen in awe. Another carriage shows up. Princess Alice looks at Act in wonder. He tells her that they are his allies. The court's restoration mage squad shows up. Alice looks at Act and wonders what kind of person he is or how he even anticipated that his brother would be poisoned. She feels dizzy and faints on the spot. He gently holds her before she completely collapses. One of the ministers, named Born, tells his assistant that he cannot believe they failed to assassinate the prince. He asks his assistant if he had really requested the Assassins' Guild for this task. His assistant tells him that he is trying his best to work out. Born asks him to wait and tells him that he will do it himself. The assistant leaves his cabin. Born takes out his phone to contact someone, but suddenly he hears a thud sound. He looks back and a cut arm flies towards him. The arm had the tattoo of the Assassin Guild. Born realizes that it is the hand of the master of the Assassin Guild. Born finds a woman standing in front of him. It was no one other than Frederica. She tells him with a smile that she was sent by Master Act, and she is his grim reaper. Her eyes turn cold. Suddenly, his phone rings. Born picks up the call, and a voice tells him that he has been checkmated. It was none other than Act. Act tells him that the Assassin's Guild has been wiped out. Born says furiously that it is impossible. Act tells him to ask Frederica if he does not believe him. Born starts shaking in fear, and then he suddenly tells him that he can make a deal with Act, and in exchange he can pay as much as Act wants. Born tells him that both of them has same interest and it is only money, and so they can make a deal and team up. Cold wind starts blowing all of a sudden. Born looks at Frederica, and she tells him in a cold tone that he is a trash, and there is no way he can be even compared to someone as great as Act. Before Born could do anything, she freezes him in an instant. Then she calls Act and tells him that it is done, and he is really so much impressive to wipe out the petty criminals. Act asks her to return to the mansion if her work is done. The next day, Princess Alice enters Act's cabin to express her apologizes and gratitude. She bows to him and tells him that she is really thankful for helping her and her brother at such a time. Act replies her that she shall take others' advice a bit seriously. She looks at his face and realizes that he is really giving her advice and it is not some kind of sarcasm. Then she tells him that he wiped out the entire Assassin Guild, and all of them were captured, and he also captured the mastermind who was a minister. She asks him why he is doing all that for them. Act tells her that she is getting wrong idea, and he is doing all this for his own sake. She asks him what he means. He tells her that if Edward is hurt, then it will affect him as a stakeholder. She asks him what he means by stakeholder. He tells her that Edward has decided to select the hero's party, and he has taken the role of advisor. Alice realizes that in that way, Act will not have to face any kind of criticism. She asks him why he declined the request before. Frederica enters the room and tells her that it seems like she doesn't understand Master at all. Alice tells them that she wants to lend her strength to Act and Edward. Frederica gives her a list of candidates for the hero party. Alice asks him how he prepared so much in a short time. Act tells her that he has been selecting suitable candidates from before. Alice asks him if he knew from before that Lawrence would become the hero of the party. She wonders how far he knows. Frederica says that it seems like she is the only one who understands the master. Then, Act tells Alice that if she has said what she wants, then she can go back to her home. She tells him that there is one more thing. Then, she requests him that she wants to stay by his side for some time. Frederica asks him what she means. Alice tells her that she wants to know for herself if Act is a good or bad person. She takes out a letter and tells them that it is the letter from the king. Frederica snatches it from her to check. It was written that until the selection of the hero party, Alice must stay as an advisor in the Adventurers Guild. The letter also had the seal of the director of guild headquarters. Act says that it means she wants to be a watcher. Frederica tells him that she can freeze the entire royal castle, as it is nothing but a waste of time. Act grants her the permission and says that she can start from that day. Frederica was so shocked and asks him if her assistance is not sufficient. Act tells her that it is her responsibility to teach Alice. Frederica looks at Alice and tells her that she is not going to be easy on her. Then Act tells her that she needs to do her job properly as long as she is part of the team. Alice agrees to him and says that she will surely assess him to see if he is really a terrible guildmaster. Act whispers that she can do as she likes. Frederica wakes up in the morning, and after changing her outfit, she heads to the hall. She greets every worker in Act's mansion with good morning. Lily, the chef's daughter, asks Frederica if Act ate the cake she made. She tells Lily that he did, and he also liked it so much. Lily gets so happy and tells Frederica that she is going to work hard and make everyone happy. The chef then tells Frederica that a guy has been in front of their gate since last night. Everyone realizes who that person is. Lily says that she does not like him at all. Frederica tells them to leave it to her and they should just focus on their work. She heads out of the mansion, and it was foggy everywhere. A man was standing near the gate. Frederica tells him that it is really a hassle to see a wandering stranger that early. Iranx tells her that he is not a suspicious person. He tells her that he is the guild master of the large-scale guild named as the Homegrown Heroes. Frederica reminds him that his guild is a former large-scale guild. Then Iranx asks her with a smile how Master Act is doing. Frederica replies him coldly that Act is still asleep. She also tells him to come with an appointment, and it is so bothersome to come early in the morning. Iranx tells her that Master Act is so much busy, and it is hard to get an appointment. She asks him what business he has with Act. Iranx replies that he wants Act to return to his guild. He falls to his knee and tells her that it has been several years since he expelled Act, and by the time he realized that their guild was running only because of him, it was already too late. He further says that they are on the brink of collapsing, and so he would like to ask Act to come back and helps him rebuild his guild. He begs her to accept his request, but Frederica refuses instantly. She tells him that it is really selfish to kick the master out and ask him to come back. Iranx proposes her an idea that they can join forces. Frederica replies him that there is no any benefit for them in joining forces, so it would be best for him to go home. Iranx clinges to her leg and starts begging. Frederica gets furious and shouts at him to quit the act. She freezes him with her ability. Then she tells him that Master Act reaches out to the weak and offers them hope, but it done only to the good-hearted weak, and there is no mercy for a trash like him. She apologizes for her sudden outburst. Then she turns towards the mansion, tells him that he should make an effort to rebuild his guild. He replies that he can't do that. She tells him that he must be quite talented since he has considered Act as useless, and so he shouldn't rely on Act and manage everything in his own. She looks into his eye in a deadly manner, says that if he tries to approach the master with forceful means, then she will kill him. Iranx feels a chill down his spine. She walks towards the mansion and suddenly recalls how she met Act when he came to her. He had told her that if she had nowhere to go, then she could come to him as he could need her for the ideal guild he is building. Frederica swears to herself that she will definitely protect Act. Somewhere in the vast and scorching Heian desert, a caravan slowly moves across the sand, carrying a few travelers who are carefully protected by a group of skilled adventurers. The adventurers are on high alert, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger as they traverse the harsh landscape. Suddenly, without any warning, a massive rock dragon emerges from the dunes ahead of them, its enormous form casting a long shadow over the caravan. The adventurers are immediately filled with fear and urgency, declaring that facing a creature of such power would require the support of an entire military force, and that they are ill-equipped to handle it on their own. As panic begins to spread and the group considers retreating, a sudden figure leaps into the front of the caravan, standing boldly in the path of the monstrous dragon. With a single precise strike, he kills the dragon instantly, its immense body collapsing into the sand. It is none other than Lawrence, the hero renowned across the entire country for his unmatched strength and skill. He turns to the caravan and calmly asks if everyone is all right, his presence commanding respect and awe. The travelers quickly assure him that they are safe and express their gratitude for his intervention, thanking him for all the danger he has faced on their behalf. Lawrence, however, waves off their thanks, saying that they should not praise him as he only did what a hero is meant to do. Slowly, the people around him realize that the legendary Lord Lawrence himself is standing before them, and they begin praising him almost as if he were a god, marveling at his incredible power. Lawrence humbly responds that he is far from being good enough to deserve such praise. One of the travelers, observing him carefully, asks if he is traveling alone in the desert. Lawrence confirms that he is indeed alone, explaining that he had recently left his previous party because they were unable to keep up with his abilities. Curious, they inquire further about his decision to leave, and he reiterates that his former companions simply could not match his speed and strength. A lady in the group looks down at the lifeless dragon and remarks that teaming up with someone of Lawrence's extraordinary power must be an extremely difficult task, but she encourages him not to be discouraged by it. Lawrence reassures them confidently, saying that there is no reason for worry, because he will certainly find great allies to join him, especially since the person he trusts the most is the one choosing and assembling companions for him. Early in the morning, Act walks through the wide corridors of his mansion, enjoying the quiet and calm, and makes his way to the dining hall. only to find it surprisingly noisy for that hour. Frederica is already there, attending to her duties with her usual composed demeanor, and Princess Alice is sitting nearby, waiting for him, her curiosity clear on her face. Frederica tells Alice that she and Act share a very strong bond, one that cannot be broken easily, and Alice immediately asks her if their closeness is some kind of romantic relationship. Frederica quietly agrees, though Act, entering the hall with calm confidence, quickly clarifies that it is not like that. And in that moment, she suddenly remembers that she forgot to wake him up earlier that morning, and she quickly bows her head, apologizing sincerely for her mistake. Act reassures her in a calm tone, telling her not to worry about it and reminding her that she is his servant, though he also adds that they share a special bond, which makes her blush lightly. She tells him that she understands it perfectly, feeling both respect and warmth from his words. Just then, head chef Koto approaches, carrying a plate with the breakfast she personally prepared, and explains in detail that today's meal is a carefully cooked chicken and vegetable fry served with her special Aurora sauce. Then, leaning closer to Act, Koto whispers in his ear that it seems like Frederica has made a new friend, speaking quietly with a hint of amusement. Act, slightly curious, asks her what she means, wanting clarification about the comment. Koto explains that Frederica seems to be forming a connection with Alice. Frederica tells Alice in a slightly mocking tone that she is just a little girl who cannot understand adult relationships. Alice, feeling offended, furiously tells Frederica that she should not speak to a princess in such a manner, raising her voice with anger and indignation. Frederica calmly responds that she only shows respect to her master, Act, and not to a little girl. Her tone firm but composed as she asserts her position. Act watches the exchange quietly, reflecting on their words and gestures, and wonders whether such interactions can even be called a friendship, questioning the nature and depth of their bond with mild curiosity. At that moment, Yoko, who is also present, tells him that they seem to be getting along quite well and that their relationship appears to be developing naturally, pointing out subtle signs of friendliness and cooperation between the two. Act notices that this is the first time Frederica did not come to wake him in the morning, which makes him realize that their growing familiarity and friendship might indeed be genuine. Yoko, observing his contemplative expression, adds that he should really try to understand a woman's feelings in order to fully appreciate such dynamics, speaking earnestly and sincerely, but Act simply replies calmly that he does not need to concern himself with such matters. After leaving his mansion, Act walks together with Frederica and Alice toward the guild, the morning air filled with a sense of purpose. Along the way, Alice thanks him warmly for giving her a hair clip, expressing her appreciation with a shy smile, and Frederica, noticing this, turns to Act with a desperate tone, asking him why he would give a gift to a woman other than her, her voice a mixture of frustration and playful jealousy. Act calmly explains that the hair clip is a magical tool, designed to make her appear like an ordinary person rather than royalty, his tone composed and matter-of-fact. Frederica comments that such a simple clip could easily lead to many misunderstandings, shaking her head slightly but unable to hide her curiosity. As they arrive at the guild hall, all the adventurers immediately stand and greet Act with respect and admiration, their eyes flicking to Alice with curiosity as they ask who she is. Act introduces her as his new disciple, explaining that she will be joining them from that day onward, and the adventurers respond by admiring her cuteness, some whispering compliments and nodding appreciatively. Together, Act, Frederica, and Alice head to his cabin, and along the way, Alice asks him if the guild has any days off, showing concern for rest and balance. Act explains that they have 2 holidays each week because neglecting rest can lower overall performance, and Alice asks if some guild members would be troubled if the guild closed during those times. He assures her that none of their members are like that, and Frederica adds that in the first 6 months, every new member is provided with living expenses and a dormitory, and that Act's mansion is located right behind the guild for quick emergency responses. Act quickly instructs Frederica not to say anything unnecessary to Alice, but she replies that it is a good opportunity to show that Act is a kind guildmaster who cares deeply for his subordinates. She points out that no other guild treats their members with such consideration, and Act, checking his watch and noting his schedule, tells them they have talked enough as he has a great deal of work to do. Frederica smiles and whispers to Alice that despite his strict words, Act is actually very kind, and Act, noticing her whisper, asks if she said something. Frederica quickly denies it and urges them to hurry so that Alice can begin learning her duties promptly. As they settle in his cabin, every guild member, one by one, comes to greet Act respectfully. Alice, observing the scene, asks him if it is compulsory for them to do so, and Frederica explains that it is not, that they come voluntarily, showing their respect and admiration for him naturally and sincerely. Frederica continues and tells Alice that her master is extremely popular among the guild members, and she herself feels like his devoted follower, almost like a love slave, expressing her loyalty with a mix of pride and teasing. Act calmly reminds her that she is just his maid and nothing more than that. His tone firm but not unkind. Frederica, with a teasing smile, replies that he is simply giving excuses to hide his embarrassment, her voice light and playful. Alice, curious, asks Act if he keeps track of all the guild members and their activities. Act agrees and explains that he personally assigns them jobs and ensures that they are placed in positions suited to their skills and abilities. Frederica adds that he carefully assigns tasks based on each member's potential, making sure everyone can grow while contributing to the guild. Alice listens in amazement and comments on how incredible it is that he manages so many people efficiently. She then notes that despite being an S-rank guild, they actually have very few members. Frederica tells her that they often head out. Alice wonders what she means by heading out. Act tells Alice that this is a good opportunity for him to show what kind of person he really is and what principles he follows in managing the guild. Just then, a small girl named Chemis enters his cabin, looking curious and a little nervous. She asks Act what he wanted to talk to her about, her voice polite but uncertain. Alice, observing her, wonders silently what such a young girl is doing in the guild and why she has been allowed to be there until now. Act speaks to Chemis in a calm and casual tone, telling her that she is being fired and that she needs to leave the guild as soon as possible. Alice is shocked beyond words and instinctively holds Chemis, asking Act in disbelief why he is expelling a child like her when she has just joined the guild. Act explains to Alice that the reason is simple. Chemis is just a little girl, and she does not have the physical strength required for an adventurer's work, which involves dangerous and demanding tasks. Alice argues that it is unfair because he himself had allowed her to join the guild knowing her limitations, and now he is sending her away, which seems inconsistent and harsh. Chemis, however, looks at Alice calmly and reassures her that it is fine, saying that she understands her own limitations and considers herself useless, but she is truly grateful for all the care and guidance she has received from the guild and from Act up until this moment. Alice tells Act that there must be something that Chemis can do, that surely she is not completely useless and there should be some way for her to contribute. Act calmly replies that there is nothing she can do within the Adventurer Guild, as her physical strength is not sufficient for the demanding tasks required there. Then he asks Frederica to hand over a document to Chemis, and when she does, he tells Chemis that it contains information regarding her new job. Alice looks at him in total confusion, unable to understand what he means. Act further explains that Chemis's talent as an alchemist is exceptional, and that the master of the Alchemist Guild had been looking for an excellent assistant, someone with skills just like hers. Alice is shocked to hear this, because she knows that the Alchemist Guild is one of the most elite and prestigious guilds in the capital, and being selected as an assistant there is a huge honor. Chemis feels overwhelmed with gratitude and tells Act that she cannot believe she has been given such a wonderful opportunity and such a great position. Act tells her to pack her bags as quickly as possible so she can start her new journey. Chemis promises him that she will try her very best and put in all her effort. Act reminds her not to forget to claim her moving expenses and any other support she is entitled to. Chemis thanks him sincerely from her heart, feeling extremely grateful for his help and guidance, and then she heads out. After Chemis leaves, Alice turns to Act and asks him what he just did and how he handled the situation so calmly. Act tells her that it is something common in many guilds, that they often expel people they do not need or who cannot perform the work required. Alice is surprised and points out that no other guild ever expels someone while also giving them a better post, full moving expenses, and proper guidance for their next step. Act calmly replies that he does it not for anyone else, but for his own ambitions and nothing more. Alice is confused and wonders how it could be part of his ambitions to kick people out of the guild yet still provide them with better opportunities elsewhere. She thinks to herself that it seems both harsh and kind at the same time, something unusual for a guild master. After that, Act asks Frederica to call the next person waiting for him, and she quickly moves to do so. As the sun sets and the day comes to an end, it is time for them to head home. Frederica mentions that they managed to expel 5 people that day, and Act agrees, noting that the work was exhausting and demanding, far more than a regular day. Alice remarks that it is no wonder that bad rumors spread about him, given that he expels people so frequently. Act turns to Alice and asks her if she now understands what kind of person he truly is and what his intentions really are behind the way he manages his guild. Alice looks at him with a warm and heartfelt smile and replies that she can see now that he is a very kind and compassionate person, and that his actions are always meant to help others, even if they seem harsh at first. Act cannot believe what she is saying and feels a mix of surprise and quiet satisfaction at her words. Frederica, standing beside them, nods in agreement and tells Alice that Act never expels anyone without a proper reason, and that this is exactly what makes him different from other guild masters, who often act recklessly or out of selfishness. They leave the cabin together, and as they step into the main hall, Alice notices that all the guild members are waiting for Act, eager to spend time with him and have a drink after finishing their work for the day. She turns to Frederica and asks if it is always like this, and Frederica explains that the members deliberately wait for Act after completing their duties because they genuinely respect him and enjoy his company. Alice, still curious, asks if Act is really so popular among the members, and Frederica confirms it, telling her that his popularity is the reason he is considered the best guild master. That night, Frederica quietly enters Act's study, carrying a warm drink in her hands. Act is focused on his work, searching for companions worthy of standing alongside Lawrence, and he tells her that he did not ask for the drink. Frederica smiles gently and replies that even without being asked, she brought it at the right time, which she believes is what makes her the best maid, always anticipating his needs. Act nods and tells her to leave it on the table so that he can focus on his work. She notices how deeply he is concentrating and remarks that he is not the type to do overtime work. Yet he calmly replies that this is a mission for the future of the country and every effort counts. Frederica, curious, asks him if there are really people who exist who can stand shoulder to shoulder with Lawrence, and then, with a hint of confidence, she says that Act will definitely accomplish it because of his abilities and insight. Act responds that he never abandons any job he takes on, no matter how difficult it may seem. Frederica leans slightly closer and asks if he already has some companions in mind. Act admits that there are a few candidates, but one of them has a bit of a personality issue. Frederica quickly guesses that he is talking about the spear user, and reassures him that it should be fine. Act, intrigued, asks why she thinks that, and she tells him that it is because he can see far more than normal humans, and with his foresight and intelligence, victory will definitely be his in the end. Frederica gently pats Act on his shoulder and tells him that she has been watching all his accomplishments and admires his hard work, but she insists that he should not overexert himself and must take better care of his own health. Act slowly gets up and tells her that he was about to go to bed without her telling him anything, and he notices her expression turning slightly gloomy, so he decides to let her continue rubbing his shoulders a little longer. Seeing her mood lift, he allows her to do so, and she smiles brightly, asking him to lie down so that she can give him a proper waist massage to help him relax. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the vast timeless plains, one of the adventurers in a traveling party warns the others that there are many orcs in front of them, estimating their number to be around 100, and they cannot believe the sight, with many of them starting to panic and considering retreat. Suddenly, another man from their midst scolds them for being so weak and pathetic. Without any hesitation, he jumps out from the crowd and, with effortless skill, sends all the orcs flying with a single swing of his spear. He tells them that they should be grateful that he happened to be passing by, and that they are witnessing Urugar's magnificent spear technique. Lawrence visits the Adventurers Guild to meet Act after receiving his message. When he arrives, Act greets him warmly and asks how he has been these days. Lawrence replies that he is full of energy and has been keeping himself busy and well. Act then introduces him to Alice, who is standing nearby, and Lawrence turns to her to greet her politely. Alice looks surprised and tells him that she cannot believe the hero of their country is standing right in front of her. She introduces herself as Alice and explains that she has recently become Act's assistant. She also says that she already knows about him, as he is famous for being the strongest hero who fights against great evils, and that everyone speaks of his courage and skill. Lawrence smiles and replies humbly that he is still nowhere near Act and does not think he deserves to be called the strongest. Act asks him to take a seat, and Lawrence sits down beside him. After sitting, he looks around and asks if Frederica has not come, and Act explains that Alice is currently the only one assisting him. Lawrence nods and tells Alice to take good care of Act and help him as much as she can. Then he turns back to Act and asks why he has summoned him so suddenly. Act replies that he has been given the important responsibility of finding good companions for Lawrence. Lawrence tells Act that he can feel completely at ease knowing that Act is the one handling everything, and asks him if the reason he summoned him was to meet the companions he has carefully chosen. Act confirms that Lawrence is correct and assures him that he will be meeting them very soon, adding that he has selected people capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Just at that moment, Urugar confidently opens the door and, wearing a self-assured smile, asks Act if he has called for him. Act immediately apologizes for summoning him so suddenly, acknowledging that it might have interrupted his busy schedule. Urugar, speaking in an arrogant tone, remarks that he has been extremely occupied with his own important matters, yet his gaze quickly shifts to Lawrence, and he is completely taken aback to see him standing there. Lawrence greets him politely with a simple hello, showing calm confidence. Urugar returns the greeting and formally introduces himself, explaining that he is widely known as the popular man with the spear. Alice whispers to Act that it is surprising how Lawrence is standing right in front of Urugar, and yet Urugar continues to speak with such an arrogant and self-important tone. Urugar then turns to Act and asks him why Lawrence is present there. Act explains calmly that Lawrence is looking for strong and capable companions to help defeat the Demon King, and that is why he has come to ask for Urugar's assistance. Urugar immediately replies that he is definitely interested in joining the group and seems excited by the idea. Lawrence reaches out and grabs Urugar's hand, showing his appreciation for his willingness, and tells him that he has been waiting for someone with his skills and strength. However, Act interrupts them and firmly tells them not to consider him as a companion. Both Lawrence and Urugar look at him in utter confusion, not understanding why he would say such a thing. Act then explains seriously that, despite Urugar's remarkable abilities, he can never truly be a good companion to Lawrence, and that joining the party would not be suitable for him. Urugar tells Act firmly that he has no obligation to listen to his advice or follow his judgment about whether he should join Lawrence's group, as his decisions are his own and he will act according to his will. Act, remaining calm, replies that he knows Urugar better than anyone else and that, in his current state, his abilities are not sufficient to be a reliable companion for Lawrence, warning that rushing into such a task could lead to serious consequences. Urugar, frustrated and clenching his teeth, tells Act that he is willing to quit his guild if necessary, as he is determined to prove himself and will not let anything stop him from achieving his goal. Act tells him that he will not interfere in Urugar's personal decisions if he chooses to leave the guild, emphasizing that the choice is entirely his. Urugar explains that his true intention is to join Lawrence's group to fight the Demon King, and that if Act attempts to prevent him, he will resign from the guild willingly, showing his resolve to prioritize his own ambitions. Act replies in his calm tone that he can do as he wishes, leaving the choice entirely up to him. Urugar then says proudly that by accomplishing such a heroic feat, his fame will rise even higher, and he will have the chance to boast about his accomplishments later, confident in his abilities and ambition. Act responds that he is genuinely looking forward to seeing how things unfold. Then Urugar begins to leave the cabin. Just before stepping out, Act warns Urugar that if he ever regrets his decision and wishes to return to the guild later, Act will make sure that it is impossible for him to come back. Urugar, maintaining his arrogant and confident demeanor, declares that he will never return because he expects to gain tremendous fame after defeating the Demon King. Act sighs deeply, feeling a strong sense of relief after hearing Urugar's confident words and knowing that he has made his decision firmly. He watches as both Urugar and Lawrence leave the cabin, feeling a mixture of anticipation and concern for what might come next. Just as they step out, Alice turns to him with a frown and asks why he had shown such a strict and seemingly harsh attitude toward Urugar, wondering why he acted in such a stern manner when the young man had clearly shown courage and determination. Act calmly tells her to calm down and not to worry so much, implying that there are reasons behind his actions that are not immediately obvious. Alice presses further, questioning why Act claimed that Urugar was not capable, even though he himself had chosen him to be one of Lawrence's companions. Finding it confusing and contradictory, Act simply tells her that the full reason for his words and actions will only become clear to her in about 2 weeks, hinting at events and developments yet to unfold that will reveal the truth behind his judgment. 2 weeks later, Act and Alice are sitting together in his cabin when suddenly Act receives a call from Lawrence, who informs him that Urugar has already left. Alice looks at Act in a stunned and somewhat confused manner, unable to fully understand the situation or the timing of everything that has happened. Meanwhile, Urugar is sitting alone in a dimly lit bar, muttering to himself that he never signed up for this kind of devilish and extremely grueling training that he is currently facing. He questions himself repeatedly, wondering why he ever decided to become one of Lawrence's companions, realizing that the path he chose is far harsher than he expected. He grimly tells himself that he is going to die if things continue like this, and he certainly does not want such a fate to occur. His mind drifts back to Ack's words, recalling the warnings and guidance he had been given, and he starts feeling deep regret for leaving the guild and ignoring the advice of someone far wiser and more experienced than him. Just at that moment, another man approaches the table, introducing himself calmly as Fyodor and explaining that he is a scout. Urugar, still feeling a mixture of frustration and curiosity, asks him to clarify his purpose and what he wants from him. Fyodor further explains that he is in the process of starting a new guild and is actively looking for excellent talent to join it, adding that he knows a lot about Urugar's reputation as one of the greatest spearmen. Urugar suddenly changes his expression, letting a charming and confident smile appear on his face, as if a new thought had sparked in his mind. Fyodor continues speaking and tells him that he has heard countless tales of his bravery and remarkable skill, including the story of how he recently single-handedly defeated 100 orcs, which has made him famous across many regions. Then Fyodor asks Urugar what he truly wants to do with such immense talent, warning him that if he does not put it to good use, it will simply go to waste. He offers Urugar a position as the combat instructor in his newly forming guild, explaining that there are many people eager to learn martial arts under his guidance. Urugar looks slightly confused, both by the question and by the opportunity Fyodor is presenting, as he had never considered such a role for himself. Fyodor further tells him that countless people would be grateful for his teaching and dedication, and that he would gain recognition and respect in a way far different from merely defeating monsters in the field. Still, Urugar hesitates, as the offer has not completely convinced him. Fyodor then explains that if Urugar continues to fight alongside Lawrence, only Lawrence will receive the glory and the spotlight after defeating the Demon King, and such fame would not truly benefit him. Urugar thinks carefully and finally agrees to Fyodor's proposal, admitting that until now he has been like a frog in the well, unaware of the larger world beyond his own narrow experiences. Fyodor smiles, pats him on the shoulder, and reassures him that they should leave the dangerous task of defeating the Demon King to Lawrence, while Urugar can lead a comfortable and respected life as the guild's combat advisor. Urugar reluctantly agrees to Fyodor's suggestion, feeling a bit relieved, but just at that moment, Act enters the bar, catching both of them by surprise. Urugar looks at Act briefly, but quickly averts his gaze in shame, feeling uneasy in his presence. Fyodor greets Act warmly and tells him that it has been a long time since they last met. Act acknowledges him, and as he observes Fyodor, he recalls that Fyodor had once served as his vice-guild master, which brings a faint smile to his face. Then Act turns his gaze toward Urugar, and with a sharp tone, he calls him pathetic for running away from the challenges he could not handle. Urugar immediately protests, insisting that he did not run away and telling Act not to spread such lies. Act leans forward and questions whether the intense training was too much for someone like him, which makes Urugar feel frustrated and angry. Urugar demands clarification, asking Act what he means by that remark. Act calmly explains that Urugar realized he could not match Lawrence and chose to run away, and that makes him nothing more than a loser in Act's eyes. Urugar, feeling both insulted and determined, challenges Act to a mock battle, placing a condition that if he wins, Act must retract his words, but if he loses, he must admit that he is a loser. Act accepts the condition without hesitation. Urugar underestimates Act, thinking that he only sits behind a desk all day and knows nothing about combat, and he feels confident that the battle will be easy. Fyodor watches the exchange with wide eyes, unable to believe that Act has agreed to accept Urugar's challenge without any hesitation. The next day, both Act and Urugar meet at the training facility inside the guild, ready for their mock battle. Alice arrives along with Lawrence, and Lawrence immediately looks at Urugar with concern, telling him that he had been searching for him everywhere and was worried about his sudden disappearance. Urugar, with a determined expression, tells Lawrence that he is not coming back to the previous path and that he is here solely to defeat Act, showing how serious he is about proving himself. Act calmly informs them that this is just a mock battle and nothing more, intending to test Urugar without causing real harm. Alice, feeling uneasy, tells them that the idea is reckless and that they should stop it before anyone gets hurt, expressing her concern for Urugar's safety. Lawrence reassures her, telling her not to worry because Act is incredibly strong and experienced, and that Urugar is not in real danger despite his confidence. Alice insists that she already knows how strong Act is, but she admits that she is worried about Urugar's safety because of his reckless nature and determination to challenge Act. Lawrence listens carefully and agrees with her concerns, then turns to Urugar, reminding him that he is a S-rank adventurer thanks to Act's rigorous training and that he should not underestimate the situation. Urugar, however, thinks to himself that it is impossible for someone like Act to be that strong and dismisses the idea, believing that all the claims about Act's abilities must be exaggerated nonsense. Urugar charges at Act with his spear at a speed so fast that it seems impossible for normal eyes to follow. But Act, who does not have normal eyes, effortlessly dodges the strike and counters, causing Urugar to trip and fall flat on the ground, landing face first. Act calmly asks him if that is the best he can do, making Urugar feel frustrated but determined to continue. Urugar gathers his strength and charges again, striking with all his speed and skill. Yet Act dodges each and every attack with precise movements and lands a powerful punch to Urugar's gut, forcing him to collapse to the ground once more. Act comments that the standards have really dropped if this is what Urugar thinks is enough to be worthy of a hero party, and tells him to look carefully, making him realize that Act has not taken a single step back and that he cannot lay a hand or foot on someone like him who is not even a combatant. Urugar, growing increasingly frustrated, shouts that he is the strongest spear user, and suddenly, his body glows with magical power as he realizes he possesses far more energy than he thought. He launches himself at Act with all his strength, but Act again dodges with ease and whispers in his ear that it is a good hit. Urugar, losing control, crashes into a wall and falls to the ground, filled with anger and disappointment at his own inability. Act calmly states that it is now proven that Urugar is still so weak and that even if he continues to fight forever in this state, he will keep losing. Act then turns to Lawrence and tells him that he is leaving the rest to him. Lawrence smiles, understanding perfectly, and walks over to Urugar, praising him for his effort, and telling him that his last move reflected all the hard work he put into training. Lawrence cheers him up a little. Urugar, despite his frustration, tells Act that he will definitely become stronger and prove him wrong soon. A few days later, Alice rushes into Act's cabin with excitement and asks him if he has seen the morning newspaper, telling him eagerly that Lawrence and his companions have defeated a band of demons, and that it was Urugar who took down the general of the demons, accomplishing something remarkable. Act tells her that it is really good news, and he feels pleased for their success. Alice then asks him if the mock battle they had a while ago was intended to motivate Urugar and push him to realize his limits. Act calmly replies that she is overthinking it, and that there was no such intention, explaining that things happen naturally and Urugar himself realized his own weaknesses. Alice continues to praise him, saying that he is truly a very kind person and that she loves that side of him, admiring his patience and foresight. Frederica, standing nearby, looks at Alice with cold, sharp eyes, clearly unimpressed by Alice's comments. Alice feels instantly embarrassed by Frederica's stare and quickly tells her to excuse her. Frederica thinks to herself that she cannot let her guard down around Alice and that she must always remain careful and vigilant, no matter what happens. Act tells Frederica not to show her ears and tail in public, reminding her to maintain her composure, and she sighs indifferently, saying whatever in response. Act then asks her what is troubling her, and she replies that he is so clueless and does not understand the feelings of his own maid, hinting at her frustration with his lack of awareness about her emotions. She quickly changes the topic and informs him that there is a report from Lawrence stating that Urugar is now training seriously and putting in a lot of effort to improve himself. As she hugs him from behind, she confides that she knows Act deliberately manipulated Urugar to leave the guild on his own so that he could not escape back, and that this was also his way of being kind to help Urugar grow stronger and realize his potential. Act tells her not to read too much into his actions or consider his words too deeply, but she insists that even if no one else understands him, she alone does. She then recalls Alice and admits that there might be some people who understand him a little, but she alone will serve him until death. Act calmly replies that she can do as she likes and that it is entirely her choice. From afar, Fyodor is quietly observing the scene, and notes to himself that the number of Hero's companions has clearly increased because of Act's careful guidance and influence. Then he looks at Frederica and recalls that he never expected her to still be alive, as he had once cast her into the abyss, believing she might interfere with his plans. Fyodor decides that it is best to continue observing them quietly from a distance. The next day, Act and Frederica enter the guild together, and as soon as they step inside, a girl named Rosalia suddenly jumps at Act with excitement and enthusiasm. She happily tells him that it has been a long time since they last met, and that she has missed seeing him. Act recognizes her immediately and asks her how she has been doing during that time. Rosalia responds with a mix of relief and joy, saying that she feared she might have died from loneliness while waiting for him. Act reassures her calmly that no one truly dies from loneliness. She then tells him how precious he is to her and how much she values his presence in her life. Frederica, standing nearby, feels an intense wave of jealousy as she witnesses the closeness between them and sharply tells Rosalia to step back from Act. Rosalia, unfazed, continues and informs Act that she has some guild members she would like to introduce to him later. Act tells her that he also has some business matters to discuss with her, and they both head toward his office. Frederica trails behind, still feeling jealous and uneasy as she watches Rosalia remain so close to Act. Suddenly, Act calls out to Frederica, making her feel happy and prompting her to ask what he needs. He tells her to bring him some tea, and she responds in an arrogant and teasing tone that she will bring it soon. Though she seems slightly annoyed, Act wonders quietly to himself why she is so angry, trying to understand her mood. Meanwhile, Rosalia comments on Act's consistent nature, saying with a smile that he has not changed a bit since they last met. Both of them enter Act's cabin, and Rosalia immediately asks him what he needs from her, looking both curious and expectant. She then asks him if he wants to spend a night with her, explaining that she would need a full day to prepare if that were the case. Act, however, calmly refuses her offer, making it clear that he has no such intentions. Rosalia expresses her disappointment, saying that she had really wanted to offer her body to him and hoped he would accept. Act firmly tells her to stop speaking such words, explaining that it diminishes her value as a woman and that he has no intention of sleeping with any of his subordinates. She hesitantly asks if he would sleep with her when she joins another guild in the future. Act, growing more serious, tells her to stop saying such things and explains that the real reason he called her was not for that purpose but to expel her from the guild. At that moment, a small fairy suddenly appears before them, looking furious, and angrily asks Act how he could do such a thing. The fairy accuses him of seducing her master and now trying to expel her from the guild. Rosalia immediately addresses the fairy as Misery, introducing her in a tone full of surprise and caution. Act calmly tells Misery that he had taken her in and allowed her to join the guild, implying that she should understand her place. Misari quickly replies that she had rescued Rosalia from a fire dragon, and her efforts should not be ignored or overlooked. She looks directly at Act and realizes that he has been quietly ignoring her words, and her frustration begins to build. Misery, growing increasingly angry, uses powerful wind magic and sends Act flying across the cabin. He crashes into the bookshelves, but, displaying his usual calm and unbothered demeanor, lands on the ground as if nothing had happened, showing that it was not a big deal for him at all. Rosalia furiously asks Misery what she is doing, scolding her for acting so aggressively. Misery sharply responds that she cannot accept someone so weak as the guildmaster, expressing her utter disdain for Act's abilities. Act remains calm and tells her that she possesses impressive magical skills, and for that reason, he will permit her to officially join the guild. Misery, still frustrated, asks him if she shall make him suffer even more. Rosalia quickly intervenes, telling Misery to cool down and not cross the line, trying to mediate between them. Misery retorts that it is Act's fault that she is yelling and that she truly hates him for it, then vanishes from the room in a burst of frustration. Rosalia apologizes to Act for the chaos and commotion. Act reassures her calmly, telling her that she has really brought some excellent talent into the guild. Rosalia admits that she initially thought Misery would be perfect as a support role, but also notes that she has serious personality issues. Act explains that they do not accept or reject members based on personality alone, and tells her that he will soon arrange for Misery's official guild certificate. Frederica enters the room carrying a cup of tea and asks Act what he is talking about. He calmly replies that they are discussing Rosalia's expulsion from the guild, explaining the situation in detail. Frederica's face lights up with a cheerful expression, and she comments that it is a good thing that Rosalia will not be expelled. The next day, Rosalia's party sets out on an adventure, moving carefully through the terrain while talking among themselves. During the journey, Misery repeatedly expresses her strong dislike for Act, insisting on how much she hates him and recalling her frustration from the previous day. Henri, another girl in the party, tries to reason with her and points out that Act is a handsome man, while Ride adds that Act has the ability to see through everything, implying that he is perceptive and capable. Henri reassures Misari that she is misunderstanding Act and tells her that he is actually a very kind and thoughtful person. Misery responds by saying that she was nearly expelled from the guild, but when she refused to accept the expulsion, the guild reconsidered their decision, which shows some fairness in Act's judgment. As they continue, Misery suddenly notices something unusual directly in front of them and excitedly points it out to Rosalia, telling her that the place appears to lead to a hidden passage. Rosalia looks around and tells the others that it seems like there is nothing unusual in front of them, feeling confused about what Misery said. Henri moves her hand forward and touches a wall that feels solid. She explains that it is a wall created by illusion magic and tells them to wait a little so that she can check for any traps carefully before proceeding. Misari, impatient, pushes her inside and says that going this way is faster. Henri comes out of the wall area and angrily asks Misari if she wants to get them all killed. All of them enter the hidden passage cautiously. Rosalia thanks Misari and tells her that she really appreciates her for finding it, but also warns her that there may still be traps around. Misery assures her that she has already checked carefully and that there should not be any traps to worry about. She gestures ahead and points to a box filled with gold coins, jewels, and other treasures, shouting proudly that it is her achievement. Rosalia tells Misery to step back and not touch anything carelessly. Misery replies that they should be fine and says they can split the treasure fairly. She reaches out to touch the treasure, but as soon as her hand touches the chest, a bright teleportation circle suddenly forms around them. Misery says that she was sure there were no traps nearby. In an instant, all of them are teleported to a strange, unfamiliar place. Rosalia looks around quickly and tells the group that it seems they are now inside a room, noting its eerie atmosphere. She immediately senses a presence around them and tells everyone to prepare for battle, her voice tense. Misery asks her in panic what is happening and what they should do. Rosalia tells her to calm down and focus on coordinating their movements carefully. At the same time, Fyodor is watching them through his magic orb from afar. He observes and notes silently that because of Misery's foolish impatience, his plan is unfolding smoothly. He then focuses on Rosalia and remarks to himself that she is an inconvenient presence that could interfere with his objectives. He thinks about the next steps he will take to remove her from the situation completely. Misari suddenly appears in the guild hall and urgently asks all the guild members to help Rosalia and her party. Everyone asks her what has happened and why she is so panicked. She explains that because of her mistake, Rosalia and the others got caught in a dungeon trap and ended up in the room of the Labyrinth Master. She admits that she feels responsible for putting them in danger and fears that they might not get out safely. One of the guild members points out that normally a party would need at least 30 people to survive such a situation, and now they are facing it with far fewer, making the problem more serious. Misery asks if there is really no way to escape from the labyrinth without defeating the master. At that moment, Act arrives at the guild hall and listens to the situation carefully. He tells everyone that it is impossible to leave until the Labyrinth Master is defeated and that there is no shortcut or escape. All of the guild members ask Act how Misery managed to reach them and what exactly happened. Act calmly explains that the Misery they saw is only a doppelganger created from wind magic and that her real body is still underground, safely hidden from immediate danger. Misery, hearing this, is impressed and realizes that Act truly knows a great deal about magic and combat. She looks at the guild members and says that because of her mistake, Rosalia is now in danger and pleads with them to help rescue her. The guild members nod in agreement and tell her that when any guild member is in trouble, it is their duty to help without hesitation. Misery feels slightly relieved by their support, but still worries. Act interrupts and denies their optimism, explaining that Rosalia is already one of the strongest adventurers, and if she is struggling to defeat the Labyrinth Master, then no ordinary group of guild members could succeed against it. Misery's eyes widen, and she asks Act if he truly plans to abandon her in this situation. Act, remaining composed, calls out to Frederica and asks her whether the preparations are fully completed. Frederica makes a superhero landing in front of Act and tells him that the preparations are fully completed, handing over his coat with a confident expression. The guild members watching the scene tell Misery to relax and not worry because Act is going to rescue them, and there is no need to panic. Act looks at Misery calmly and asks her to show them the way to where Rosalia and the others are trapped. Misery feels completely shocked and asks him why he is willing to help her even after all the harsh and rude things she said to him. Act explains that he is not doing it for her sake and that it has nothing to do with her words or actions. He tells her that it is his responsibility because he was the one who gave her the exploration request in the first place, and he must make sure it succeeds safely. Misery hesitates, saying that she cannot change anything alone and fears for the others. Frederica, standing nearby, reassures her confidently that she will soon see just how great Act truly is. All three of them reach the exact spot where Rosalia and the others had entered the trap, and Act wastes no time assessing the situation. Without hesitation, he charges directly into the trap, moving with incredible speed and determination, showing no fear of what lies ahead. Meanwhile, Rosalia is struggling against the master of the labyrinth, a powerful and terrifying demoness. She clashes with it repeatedly, using all her skills and strength, but soon realizes that it is far too strong for her to handle alone. Every attack she launches is blocked or countered by the demoness's massive, writhing tentacle, and no matter how skillfully she strikes, the creature regenerates its limbs almost instantly. In a desperate attempt to gain the upper hand, she unleashes multiple attacks at the same time, managing to cut through many of the tentacles, but the demoness quickly reforms them, leaving her exhausted and frustrated. Seeing that she is running out of options and is in grave danger, Act arrives just in time, moving like a true hero, and rescues her from the demoness before its tentacles can touch her, ensuring her safety with perfect timing and precision. Rosalia is completely shocked and amazed that Act has arrived to rescue her from the demoness. Frederica immediately shifts into her beast form and lunges at the creature, biting off its massive tentacles with incredible strength and precision, making the demoness lose its advantage. Rosalia, still catching her breath, turns to Act and asks him if he truly came to save her, and Act calmly explains that he only arrived because Misery requested his help. Rosalia, feeling grateful, thanks Misery sincerely for her quick thinking and courage in alerting Act. After a moment, Act inquires about the rest of the party and asks if they are safe. Misery explains that her main body is currently setting up a protective barrier nearby while the other members are trapped safely inside it. Following her guidance, Act leads them to the barrier and quickly notices that Ride has sustained a serious injury to his leg. Without hesitation, he uses his unique ability of time manipulation to heal Ride's wounds, restoring him fully in an instant. Henri, witnessing the scene, exclaims in awe that their guildmaster is truly extraordinary. Act explains to them that what he did for Ride's leg is an application of proper time manipulation, by which he was able to slow down the bleeding and stop the injury from worsening. He then turns his attention to the wind barrier and praises Misery for doing an excellent job in both defending the trapped members and notifying him about the situation. He calmly tells her to leave the rest of the work to him, and Misery's face softens with emotion as she hears such words from the man she has always claimed to hate. Henri and the other guild members immediately express their desire to fight alongside them, but Act warns them firmly that if they try, they will all end up dying recklessly. He says that only he, Frederica, Rosalia, and Misery will confront the Labyrinth Master. Just as he finishes, a massive tentacle strikes toward them, but Frederica reacts instantly, biting it off with precision. Rosalia points out that the tentacles are too troublesome to handle, and Act calmly explains that they need to outmatch the speed of the creature's regeneration, using only the three of them who are capable. Rosalia asks in surprise how such a feat is possible with just 3 people, and Act confidently replies that 3 people will be more than enough. The battle begins and Frederica immediately uses her power to freeze all the tentacles of the demoness, but they quickly regrow as if nothing had happened. Rosalia charges forward and strikes with her sword, trying to cut through the regenerated limbs, but it proves to be completely ineffective. Act then races toward the demoness with incredible speed and makes a massive jump, closing the distance between them in an instant. He grabs a handful of her hair and swings in front of her eyes to stop her from moving. He tells the demoness that she has already caused enough trouble and that her crime of harming his subordinates is severe, so she must atone for it with her life. He looks directly into her eyes and activates his absolute time stop technique. Instantly, the demoness freezes completely and collapses lifelessly to the ground, leaving every member of the guild shocked and speechless at the display of his overwhelming power. Act turns to Frederica and praises her, telling her that she did a very good job supporting him during the fight. Suddenly, he loses consciousness from the effort and is about to fall to the ground. But Frederica reacts immediately, rushing forward to catch him midair and prevent him from hitting the floor. Rosalia, still astonished, asks Act what exactly he did to the demoness, and he calmly explains that it is a technique that completely stops the internal time of anyone who meets his gaze. Rosalia questions whether it is really possible to kill someone just by looking at them, and Misari hesitantly asks if it is truly acceptable to use such a powerful and dangerous ability. Act reassures them that there is no problem, and that they should now just head home. As they leave the battlefield, Act feels weak from exertion and struggles to stand on his own, so both Rosalia and Frederica support him from either side. Rosalia smiles warmly at him and tells him sincerely that he is truly the best guildmaster anyone could have. Later that day, in Act's cabin, Misari sincerely apologizes to him, feeling deeply responsible because her actions had put everyone's life in danger. She repeats her apology several times and tells him that she intends to leave the guild since she caused so much trouble, not only for the others but also for Act. She notices that he has applied a healing patch on his eye after using so much magic and expresses concern. She adds that she has heard about the delays in the organization and believes she has no right to remain in the guild. Act reassures her that it is far too early for her to leave, reminding her that she is still a newcomer and that it is not uncommon for newcomers to make mistakes. Misari admits that she made an error while using another skill, but Act tells her that her support in the underground battle was remarkable and had been essential. He hands her the guild certificate, officially recognizing her as a full member of the guild, and tells her that because she acknowledged her faults and acted effectively despite her pride, he cannot let go of someone with such capability. He asks her to continue supporting Rosalia and the other members in the future. Misari, overwhelmed with emotion, begins crying and promises that she will do her very best for the guild. Act then adds that Rosalia will be put on a trial period for putting the party in danger. Misari protests, saying it was entirely her fault and that Rosalia should not be punished. Act explains that it is the leader's responsibility to protect the party and that such measures are necessary. He further tells her that there is a guild vacation home at the seaside where Rosalia will take the members to stay for about half a month. During that time, they can relax, play at the beach, or enjoy themselves as they wish, and he will ensure they have enough money to live comfortably. Rosalia smiles brightly and says that she will make sure to take a proper break and enjoy her time. Then Rosalia and Misari leave the cabin together, walking down the corridor while talking quietly. Frederica turns to Act and asks him if the trip he arranged is not just a simple guild outing combined with a welcome party for the new members. She smiles warmly and calls him a caring guild master, appreciating how he thinks about both the safety and enjoyment of his subordinates. Later, at the seaside villa, all the guild members are enjoying themselves on the beach, playing in the water, building sand structures, or simply relaxing, while Rosalia rests quietly on the sand, enjoying a moment of peace. A sudden thought strikes Misari, and she asks Rosalia why she was almost expelled the other day. Rosalia explains calmly that Act would have expelled her, and then sent her to join Hero Lawrence's group. Misari feels a wave of softness and concern upon hearing this, and asks Rosalia why she refused such an opportunity. Rosalia replies that she did not want to leave the side of the guildmaster she respects and admires. Misari feels even softer, realizing that Rosalia chose to stay by Act's side instead of taking the chance to work with Hero Lawrence. Rosalia asks her if it is strange to want to be near the person she loves, and tells her that Act always thinks carefully about the future of his subordinate. She explains that even when he speaks harshly or expels someone, it is often a way to prevent them from looking back. But if the subordinate truly cannot bear it, he will cancel the expulsion. Misari, listening carefully, asks if Act really considers his subordinates that much, and Rosalia confirms that he does, adding that it is one of the reasons everyone loves him so much. Misari feels guilty for her earlier actions and admits that she did something wrong. Rosalia reassures her that it is true, but Act will surely forgive her because the failure of a subordinate is always the responsibility of their master. As they talk, Rosalia notices Misari blushing and sighs lightly, saying that another rival for Act's attention has appeared. Misari, embarrassed and flustered, asks what she means, and Rosalia teasingly replies that Misari might have fallen in love with Act too. Misari denies it sharply, feeling frustrated. Far away, Frederica senses something unusual and tells Act that she detected the waves of a romantic comedy unfolding nearby. Act dismisses it lightly, telling her not to say nonsense. Frederica continues teasing him and asks Act to declare in the guild that he is the best, but he calmly replies that all his subordinates are equal in his eyes. She sighs and clarifies that she was not referring to that. Soon, both Act and Frederica return to the same spot where Rosalia and her party were previously trapped. Frederica asks why they have returned, and Act explains that Miseri, being a high-ranking fairy, had said there were no teleportation traps near the area, so he came to confirm whether that was really true. He uses his eyes of Chrono to carefully observe the past and discovers that someone had indeed cast teleportation magic on Rosalia and the others. Frederica remarks that it must have been an extremely powerful individual, since teleportation magic is an advanced form of magic. She asks Act what the suspect looks like, and he tells her that the magic was activated from a place so far away that even his Chrono eyes cannot see it. Frederica is shocked and says that it seems impossible to use teleportation magic from outside the range of his eyes. Act tells her to calm down, and then he adds with determination that one thing is absolutely certain: someone is trying to kill his important subordinate. He clenches his fist so hard in anger that it begins to bleed. Frederica walks slowly to him and holds his bleeding hand, asking him to stop before it gets hurt further. Act reassures her that he does not yet know who the culprit is, but he will definitely make them repay the debt for threatening his subordinate. The next day, Alice enters the guild and immediately notices Act shouting firmly at Camellia, the guild receptionist. Act tells her in a strict voice to pack her bags and leave the guild immediately. Camellia, looking very distressed, keeps apologizing repeatedly for the mistake she made, insisting that she did not mean any harm and expressing her deep regret for what happened. Alice, sensing the tension, approaches Act cautiously and asks him if Camellia did something truly wrong or if he is being too harsh. Act explains calmly that Camelia's son is very sick with a high fever and that he received a call from her grandmother, who is taking care of the child, informing him of the situation. He tells Alice that his decision to ask Camellia to leave the guild is not out of anger, but because he wants her to tend to her child without any distractions. Before leaving the guild, Camellia approaches Act one last time, bowing deeply and expressing her sincere gratitude for his understanding and consideration, telling him that she will never forget his kindness. Act tells her firmly but kindly that she should leave immediately, not show up at the guild for a few days, and focus entirely on making sure her son fully recovers. Camellia agrees wholeheartedly and thanks him once again, saying that she is extremely grateful for his guidance and support. Alice tells Act that it is really kind of him to let Camellia go home so that she can take care of her sick child without worrying about work. Act, however, tells her that she is misunderstanding his intentions and that he did not act out of kindness or sympathy, but simply because he does not want her to bring the fever and illness into the workplace and risk spreading it to others. He explains calmly that his decision is purely practical and for the safety of everyone in the guild. Later in the afternoon, Act calls another adventurer to his office and tells him firmly that he should not come to the guild anymore. The adventurer, looking a little surprised, explains that he still has ties to the guild and that leaving is not so simple for him. Act interrupts him sharply, asking him to remain silent and reminding him that as the leader of the guild, he has full authority over its members and that everyone is required to follow his orders without question. After the adventurer leaves, Alice enters Act's cabin and asks him quietly who that person was and why he had been expelled from the guild. Act calmly explains that the adventurer had requested a few days off and that he wanted to give him a proper solution rather than simply refusing him. Alice, looking a little concerned, tells Act that it would be unfair to expel someone just because they needed a short break. Act replies that he is aware of the adventurer's situation, as he had heard that his mother had collapsed at home, and he wanted to make it easier for him to take care of his family. He further explains that he arranged for the adventurer to work at the commercial guild, which is very close to his home, with far fewer working hours than in his guild, and that he would be able to go home whenever he needs. Alice points out that the adventurer still wanted to remain in Act's guild, showing her concern for his feelings. Act tells her that the adventurer's parents are elderly and that it is impossible to know when they might fall ill again, so it is better for him to have a job nearby to take care of them properly. Just then, the adventurer shouts from outside the window. Act looks out and sees him standing on the ground, bowing slightly and thanking him sincerely. The adventurer tells Act that he will be grateful to him for his entire life and promises that once his parents are well again, he will definitely return to the guild to serve under Act once more. Act sighs deeply and wonders to himself why the adventurer is speaking so gratefully and expressing such devotion to the guild even though he has just been expelled, and he reflects quietly on the unexpected loyalty and emotions of his members. Later that evening, a young girl arrives at Act's desk, visibly exhausted and holding a letter in her hand, telling him in a tired voice that she has reached her limit and that the workload has become so overwhelming that she feels she cannot continue and wants to quit immediately. She hands the letter over to Act, as if to formalize her resignation, but he gently refuses to accept it, telling her that he is not going to allow her to give up so easily. The girl insists that she is truly at her limit and that the work is far too difficult for her to manage any longer. But Act reassures her in a calm and firm tone that it is far too early for her to surrender, that she still has the ability to do her best, and that he believes in her potential to overcome the difficulties. Alice, who is observing the situation, asks Act quietly if that girl is really trying to quit the guild, showing her surprise and concern. Act shakes his head slightly and explains that she is not quitting in the ordinary sense, but that she has chosen to leave the guild on her own in order to take on a new responsibility as the guild master of the Enchanters Guild. Alice is stunned and finds it difficult to believe that someone so young could be capable of becoming a guild master. The young girl, noticing Alice's expression, suddenly stands up and asks her with a playful tone if she really looks so young. Rita shakes Alice's hand warmly and introduces herself, telling her name with a polite smile. Alice looks at her curiously and asks why she wants to quit her current job despite her position. Rita explains that she does not enjoy working above others and that her true wish is to once again work under Act, feeling more comfortable following his guidance rather than leading others. Act listens calmly and then denies her request, reminding her that it has already been 3 years since she became the guild master of the Enchanters Guild, and that by now she should be fully capable of handling all responsibilities that come with the position. Rita insists once more that she is at her limit and cannot continue in her current role, her voice showing both frustration and exhaustion. Act replies in a measured tone that the sales performance of the Enchanters Guild has been steadily increasing every year since she took control, showing that she is managing things well and achieving results. Rita replies modestly that it could just be a coincidence and that it does not necessarily reflect her skills. Act smiles gently and tells her that if she can achieve such consistent results, even by coincidence, it is actually the best proof of her talent and potential. He pats her on the head kindly and reassures her that it is still far too early for her to give up, emphasizing that she possesses the talent to not only be a successful guild master but also an excellent magic tool craftsman. Rita listens quietly to Act's words and then agrees with him after thinking for a moment. She tells him that if she quits her job now, it will only cause him more trouble, and she does not want to become a burden to him. She says that she will return to her guild and continue her work as best as she can. Act nods and tells her that instead of wasting time at his guild, she should focus on creating more magic tools and improving her craft. Rita smiles and tells him that once she finishes her next creation, she will bring it to him to see. She then leaves the cabin with a determined look, saying that she will do her very best from now on. After she leaves, Act tells Alice that Rita wanted to come back even though she already had a better position and more authority, which shows her sincerity and attachment to the guild. That night, in the guild hall, everyone gathers together to drink alcohol and celebrate, including Alice, who joins them happily. She takes a sip and says that she has never tasted such delicious alcohol before. Rosalia laughs and agrees with her, saying that Alice is right because it is the guild's special alcohol, and not only the drink but also the food is wonderful. She explains that everyone in the guild helped prepare the items together. Alice looks around the table and says that everyone seems so amazing and full of joy. Ride smiles and replies that it is all because of their guild master, and that everyone is there only because of him. Henri nods and adds that if Act had not reached out to her in the past, she might not even be alive today. Hearing this, Alice looks around the cheerful room and softly says that everyone in the guild truly admires Act for everything he has done for them. One of the guild members slowly stands up from his seat and asks Alice if she really thinks that everyone admires the guild master. Alice, slightly surprised, asks him if she is wrong in thinking that. Rosalia, sitting calmly, calls Alice by her name and tells her that she is making a big mistake in judging their feelings. She stands up from her seat with a gentle smile and explains to Alice that all of them love their guild master, and it is not just simple admiration. The other guild members nod in agreement with her words. Rosalia continues and tells Alice that they have gone far beyond mere admiration a long time ago, and that their feelings have grown deeper because Act is a very kind and caring person. Henri, teasingly, steps closer to Alice and asks her in a playful tone if she also has feelings for the guildmaster. Alice freaks out immediately, her face turning bright red, and she hurriedly insists that she does not feel that way at all. She starts blushing uncontrollably while looking away. Another guild member adds that Act is so cool, talented, and kind that it is impossible not to be drawn to him, and many of them admit that they cannot help but fall for him. Rosalia, suddenly slamming her hand on the table to get everyone's attention, speaks in a firm and sober voice, declaring that Act belongs to her alone. Another guild member argues loudly with Rosalia, insisting that Act belongs to him. Immediately, everyone starts shouting over each other, claiming that Act belongs to them, and the noise fills the entire guild hall. Alice, seeing the chaos, asks everyone to calm down, but no one pays attention to her words, and the shouting continues even louder. Rosalia turns to Alice, her eyes full of determination, and tells her that she is so deeply in love with Act that she would even offer her virginity to him alone. She continues, saying that she wants to dedicate everything she has, her loyalty, her effort, and her heart to the guild master. Alice, feeling flustered and worried, asks Rosalia to calm herself down and suggests that she should drink some water to relax. Just at that moment, Act enters the hall quietly, but with a commanding presence. The moment he steps in, the entire hall falls completely silent, and no one dares to speak. Act looks at everyone with a cold and serious expression and asks them why they are making such a mess in the middle of the night. He adds in a stern tone that the shouting was loud enough to be heard all the way to his mansion and that they have disrupted his sleep. The guild members immediately start apologizing to Act, bowing their heads and speaking with such humility that it feels as if they are begging mercy from a god. They express their regret loudly, trying to show how sorry they are for causing a disturbance, and Act listens silently without interrupting. After a while, he turns and leaves the guild hall, telling them firmly that they should hurry up and go home. Realizing his intent, all of them decide to end the chaos and quietly make their way out to return home. As they walk, Alice turns to Rosalia and comments that it seems everyone is happy despite being scolded by Act, wondering how that could be possible. Rosalia smiles and explains to Alice that Act's way of showing kindness is sometimes through scolding and that it is meant to protect them. She adds that drinking too much alcohol could interfere with their work the next day, which is why Act personally came to stop them. Alice asks if he was not angry about his own sleep being disturbed, and Rosalia points out that Act was not in his pajamas, meaning he had not been sleeping at all and had come only to prevent them from overindulging. She further explains that Act never yells at his members without a reason, and that when he does show anger, it is only because he cares deeply for them and loves his guild members. Alice listens carefully and begins to understand what Rosalia means. She reflects that many guildmasters treat their members merely as tools or assets, but Act is different. He genuinely values every member as a subordinate and considers their well-being important. Rosalia emphasizes to Alice that Act is truly a good person, and Alice smiles in agreement, realizing that he really is a kind and considerate guildmaster and that she should not trust any rumors that says the opposite.